Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Friday, August 28th, 2026, and you're listening to Alex's News. The weather in Riverside is set to reach a high of 98.1 degrees Fahrenheit today, with a low of 76.4. Please remember to stay hydrated and seek shade if you are spending time outdoors during this heat. On today's show, we will examine the reasons behind the Trump administration's new approach to federal grant distribution and look into the factors driving what is now the largest recorded cyclosporiasis outbreak in American history. We will also touch on several other important developments making headlines across the country. All of this and more is coming up on Alex's News, so be sure to stay tuned for the full report. Good morning. This morning we're looking at some big changes to how the federal government hands out grants. Ethan, thanks for being here. What's the administration actually trying to do?
Good morning, Grace. So as of today, the Trump administration is pushing a whole series of changes to how federal grants get managed and distributed. According to reporting from NPR and its program, The Indicator, the big theme is more executive discretion and less regulatory oversight. In plain terms, the government would have more freedom to decide who gets money and who doesn't. Analysts worry these proposals could let officials cancel grants, quote, on a whim, end quote.
On a whim. That sounds pretty sweeping. Who stands to lose the most here?
That's the concern. NPR reports that this new flexibility could specifically disadvantage what analysts call, quote, blue cities and states, end quote. The idea is that if funding can be pulled arbitrarily, it can also be pulled selectively. So places that aren't politically aligned with the administration could find their money more vulnerable. It essentially ties federal dollars a little more closely to who's in power.
Let's talk about the legal side. How is the administration justifying all this?
Right, so this is where it gets a bit technical, but it matters. According to legal summaries from Thomson Coburn, the administration frames this as part of a broader, quote, multi-front attack, end quote, aimed at eliminating diversity, equity, and inclusion practices, what most people know as DEI. They're leaning on an, quote, expansive reading, end quote, of the Supreme Court's SFFA decision. They're also citing the July 29, 2025 DOJ guidance and several DEI executive orders.
Is there one executive order in particular that stands out?
There is. One of them is titled Addressing DEI Discrimination by Federal Contractors. And the practical mechanism here is a proposed revision to something called the Financial Assistance General Certifications and Representations in the System for Award Management. It's a mouthful, but the effect is simple. Anyone receiving a federal award would have to certify they're complying with these executive orders and federal anti-discrimination laws.
And what happens if a grantee doesn't certify or falls out of line?
That's the leverage. By requiring that certification, the administration potentially creates a legal path to revoke funding for anyone deemed non-compliant. So it's not just about signing a form. It becomes a tool. If the government decides a recipient's programs violate its interpretation of these orders, the money can be clawed back. That's why critics see this as tying grants to the administration's ideological priorities.
Let's make this concrete. I understand Head Start is one program in the crosshairs. What's going on there?
Yes, Head Start is probably the clearest example. There's a proposed rule from the Administration for Children and Families, or ACF, titled Reducing Federal Burden for Head Start Programs. It was published on August 7th, just a few weeks ago. According to the granted research team, the proposal would replace the detailed Head Start program performance standards with a much shorter rule. That shorter rule would defer far more to state policy and local discretion.
Less federal oversight, more local control. What are the biggest changes on the money side?
The fiscal piece is dramatic. Right now, programs can spend up to 15% of their total approved costs on administration. This proposal would slash that cap down to 5%. A CF itself estimates that would force roughly $754 million to be shifted out of administrative lines. And here's the kicker. A CF notes that currently only 3.7% of Head Start grants operate at or below that 5% threshold, so almost every program would have to restructure.
That's a huge shift for nearly everyone. What about the people doing the work, the staff?
The staffing changes are significant too. According to the granted research team, the proposal eliminates detailed credential requirements for program directors, home visitors, and family services staff. It also removes teacher degree targets, so the guardrails that specify who's qualified to work with these kids would largely go away. Supporters frame it as reducing burden and giving programs flexibility. Critics worry it lowers the bar for quality in early childhood education.
Head Start also deals with young kids' health. Does this touch that?
It does, and this is where a lot of people raise alarms. The proposal removes mandatory timelines for developmental and health screenings. It eliminates required monthly mental health consultations. And notably, it removes protections against behavioral discipline, suspension, and expulsion. So the safeguards that currently prevent very young children from being suspended or expelled would no longer be required. That's a meaningful change for families who rely on these programs.
What about the day-to-day schedule? How much time kids actually spend in the classroom?
There are operational changes there too. Center-based preschool minimums would drop from 3.5 hours daily down to 3 hours. And the proposal eliminates the 1,380-hour annual requirement for early Head Start, so less required classroom time overall. When you add that to the staffing and health changes, you start to see a picture of a leaner, less prescriptive program with a lot more left up to local decision makers.
You mentioned language instruction earlier. What's changing for kids who speak another language at home?
This is a big one for a lot of families. The proposal shifts toward prioritizing English instruction over home language development. According to the granted research team, that affects roughly 18,800 classrooms. It's a real change in philosophy for a program that has long supported kids learning in their home language. There's also an eligibility change. It removes the self-attestation option for families who can't produce income documentation. So families without paperwork could find it harder to qualify.
And who runs these programs? The parents' role. Does that change too?
Yes, Head Start has historically given parents a formal seat at the table. This rule removes mandatory parent committee roles in things like employee recruitment and communication with the Policy Council. Now, it's worth being clear here. The Head Start Act itself remains law. That preserves certain statutory requirements for professional development and for the Policy Council. So some parent involvement survives by statute, but the rulemaking still represents a major shift in how the program actually runs day to day.
So the law sets a floor, but the rules on top of it are being pulled back. Is Head Start the only place this is happening?
No, and that's an important point. This is bigger than one program. The Office of Management and Budget, or OMB, is currently rewriting a regulation called 2 CFR Part 200. According to the granted research team, that rewrite proposes fundamental changes to cost principles, pre-issuance reviews, and, crucially, termination authority. That last piece, termination authority, is really the heart of this whole story about pulling grants more easily.
Is that OMB rewrite already in effect?
Not yet. It's currently blocked from being finalized until December 11th, 2026, under a Senate continuing resolution. So there's a window here, several months from now, before that piece can move forward. But the direction is clear. Between the OMB rewrite, the Head Start rule, and those certification requirements, you're seeing a coordinated push toward the same goal.
When you step back and look at all of it together, what's the takeaway?
The cumulative effect, according to this reporting, is a transition toward a grant system where funding is simply more precarious. Money would be tied more closely to the administration's ideological priorities, particularly around DEI and local governance. For the organizations that depend on these grants, from preschools to city programs, it means less certainty year to year. Supporters call it reducing federal burden and restoring local control. Critics see it as concentrating power and making funding a political lever.
So a lot to watch in the months ahead, especially before that December deadline. Ethan, thank you for walking us through it.
My pleasure, Grace, and we'll be keeping an eye on that December 11th date and how these rules develop.
That's our reporter, Ethan. We'll have more right after the break. Welcome back. We've been following a major food safety story all morning, and this next one is significant. Federal health officials say we're now looking at the largest cyclosporiasis outbreak of its kind in U.S. history. Our reporter Chloe has been tracking the details. Chloe, good morning. Just how big is this?
Good morning, Grace. It's enormous. As of today, August 28th, this outbreak has sickened 11,458 people across 20 states. That's according to reporting from both the Associated Press and Fox Business. And officials have traced it back to contaminated iceberg lettuce from Taylor Farms de Mexico. To put the scale in perspective, this is the biggest outbreak of its kind the country has ever recorded.
20 states is a wide reach. Has that list grown recently?
It has. The Food and Drug Administration just expanded the list of affected areas to include Georgia, Tennessee, and Texas. So this isn't a contained regional problem anymore. It's spread across a huge swath of the country. And that expansion tells you investigators are still connecting new cases back to the original source as they dig deeper into the supply chain.
Let's talk about that source. Where exactly did this lettuce come from?
The multi-state outbreak was traced to iceberg lettuce produced at a Taylor Farms facility in central Mexico. According to Fox Business, that contaminated produce was supplied to Taco Bell restaurants. But it didn't stop there. The recall also extended to market-side shredded lettuce and iceberg salad products that were sold at Walmart. So we're talking about both restaurant and grocery store exposure, which helps explain why so many people got sick.
So how quickly did the company and Taco Bell respond once they knew?
Fairly quickly, actually. On July 17th of this year, about 6 weeks ago now, Taylor Farms de Mexico voluntarily pulled all iceberg lettuce sourced from central Mexico from the U.S. market. That same day, Taco Bell stopped using the lettuce entirely, and Taylor Farms temporarily halted all production at its central Mexico facility. So there was a coordinated shutdown once the connection became clear.
Is the FDA confident the tainted lettuce is actually off store shelves now?
The FDA says yes. It remains confident that all affected lettuce has been removed from the market, but the investigation isn't over. As of yesterday, August 27th, the agency noted its staffers are continuing to inspect and test produce at the farm, working in cooperation with the Mexican government. So even though they believe the danger has passed for consumers, they're still trying to pin down exactly what went wrong at the source.
Have they actually found the parasite in the lettuce yet?
That's one of the strange wrinkles here. As of August 20th, Taylor Farms reported that its product testing had not yet produced a confirmed positive cyclospora sample. So the epidemiological trail points strongly to this lettuce, but the lab confirmation from the produce itself hadn't come through as of that date. That's not unusual with cyclospora, because the parasite can be difficult to detect in food, even when it's clearly making people sick.
Let's turn to the human cost. I understand there have been deaths.
Sadly, yes. Fox Business reports the outbreak has resulted in 2 deaths, and both occurred in Michigan, which has been the hardest-hit state in this whole event. Health officials did note that both individuals who died had significant underlying health conditions. So while cyclosporiasis is rarely fatal on its own, it can be far more dangerous for people who are already medically vulnerable.
And beyond those deaths, how many people have ended up in the hospital?
Fox Business described the hospitalizations as, quote, hundreds, end quote. But the more specific figure is that there were at least 495 hospitalizations attributed specifically to the Taylor Farms outbreak as of August 27th. That's a serious number. It tells you that for a lot of people, this wasn't just a mild stomach bug. Many needed real medical care to recover.
For folks who've never heard of it, what exactly is cyclospora?
So the CDC describes cyclospora as a single-celled, microscopic parasite that infects the bowels and spreads through feces. As the Associated Press reported, the resulting illness, called cyclosporiasis, commonly causes watery and sometimes, quote, explosive, end quote, diarrhea. Fox Business added that patients may also deal with stomach cramps, nausea, fatigue, and weight loss. It's genuinely unpleasant, and it can knock people flat for quite a while.
How long does that illness usually last?
This is what makes it tricky. Symptoms typically appear about 1 week after infection, and they can last anywhere from a few days to a full month. What's really deceptive is that the illness sometimes appears to resolve, and then it comes right back. Some people don't show any symptoms at all. The good news is it can be treated with an antibiotic combination called trimethoprim sulfamethoxazole, which many listeners might know by the brand name Bactrim.
You mentioned this is part of a bigger trend. What's the wider picture this year?
Right, and this is what really concerns health officials. The Associated Press reports there have been roughly 29,000 confirmed or suspected cyclosporiasis cases in the U.S. throughout 2026, with 922 total hospitalizations nationwide. So the Taylor Farms outbreak is a huge chunk of that, but not the whole story. To understand how unusual this year is, consider that the previous worst year was 2019, which saw about 4,700 reported illnesses.
So this year is many times worse than the previous record?
Exactly. We're talking about roughly 6 times the number of cases compared to that 2019 peak. That kind of jump is why investigators are paying such close attention. It suggests something broader may be happening with the food supply or with detection, and officials are still working to understand the full scope of why parasitic infections have surged so dramatically this year.
Has all of this changed how Americans are shopping for food?
It really has. Dave Shazinski, who's the president and CEO of the Marzetti Company, told Fox Business that this event actually shifted American consumer behavior. At the beginning of the outbreak, sales of leafy greens plummeted by as much as 30%. Overall vegetable sales fell between 16 and 17%. So people didn't just avoid lettuce, they backed away from produce more generally.
Did that hesitation spread beyond vegetables?
It did, and that's the interesting part. Shazinski noted that sales of fruit also declined, which reflects a broader consumer hesitation toward fresh produce overall. In other words, once shoppers got nervous about contaminated lettuce, that anxiety bled into their whole approach to the produce aisle. That's a real economic ripple effect for growers and grocers who had nothing to do with the original contamination.
So where do things stand right now for someone worried about their next salad?
The reassuring news is that the FDA believes the affected lettuce is already off the market, and both Taco Bell and Taylor Farms took action back on July 17th. The investigation continues at that central Mexico farm alongside the Mexican government. For consumers today, the immediate risk from this particular outbreak appears to be winding down. But health officials are clearly watching the broader surge in cases very closely as the year goes on.
Really important reporting. Chloe, thank you so much for breaking all that down for us.
My pleasure, Grace. Thanks for having me.
Here are some other headlines. A glacier collapse on Wednesday, August 26, 2026, has left the Himalayan border region of Nepal and Tibet in a state of flux. This frozen disaster sent a torrent of ice, rock, mud, and water crashing into the Lende Kola and Botakoshi river system, leaving a trail of destruction. The death toll is staggering, with reports ranging from 353 up to 389 in Nepal and 3 in Tibet. Over 1,300 people remain missing, including 517 foreign nationals, with 90 Americans unaccounted for. The disaster was a real blow to infrastructure, destroying over 35 bridges and damaging 40 kilometers of road, cutting off the route between Kathmandu and Lhasa. Rescue efforts are in full swing as Nepal mobilized over 30,000 security personnel and China deployed 500 military and paramilitary staff, 681 firefighters, and 13 rescue dogs. Prime Minister Balendra Shah and Premier Li Qiang have both visited the hardest-hit areas to oversee the recovery. To help the region get back on its feet, a relief fund has received pledges of $229 million from the United States, China, India, and the World Bank, while the United Nations released $2 million. The Iranian economy is feeling the squeeze as Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent launches Operation Economic Outcast, a plan designed to isolate the nation financially. This high-stakes gamble has already seen the United Arab Emirates suspend trade relations, cutting off a primary financial gateway. The tension spilled into the water on August 27, 2026, when the IRGC Navy likely attacked a Kuwaiti-flagged tanker in the Strait of Hormuz to assert dominance over maritime traffic. Domestically, Iran is in a tailspin, with the IMF predicting inflation will hit 70% and the economy will contract by over 5% by year-end. The open market value of the US dollar has surged past 200,000 tomans, while rice and beef prices have spiked by 60% and 150% respectively. A daily gasoline deficit of 15 million liters has sparked a clash between pro-concessions officials, including President Masoud Pezeshkian, and anti-concessions factions over whether to dip into fuel reserves to keep the public calm. Despite the chaos, Central Bank Governor Abdel Nasser Hamadi claims the country still holds $17.2 billion in foreign currency reserves. Medical breakthroughs are providing a glimmer of hope as the FDA approved a new medication for pancreatic cancer on August 27, 2026. According to NPR, this drug has extended patient survival rates by a median of 13.2 months in clinical trials, a move Dr. Brian Wolpin of the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute says will have significant future implications for patient care. Meanwhile, the Bladder Cancer Advocacy Network is highlighting a variety of ways to fight non-muscle invasive bladder cancer. Patients are utilizing intravesical therapy delivered via catheter, including BCG immunotherapy for high-risk cases. For those who do not respond to BCG, gene therapy via adstiladrin may help patients avoid bladder removal, while the immunotherapy Anktiva is being used alone or in combination with BCG. When these options fail, doctors are turning to intravesical chemotherapy to keep the disease in check. Meta Platforms Inc. is paying a steep price for its design choices, reaching a landmark settlement with 47 U.S. states, the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, American Samoa, and the Northern Mariana Islands. To resolve claims that Facebook and Instagram were designed to be addictive to children, Meta will pay between $17 and $18 billion. Roughly $12.7 billion will be paid over 10 years, with another $5 billion contingent on rivals like TikTok and YouTube following suit. Virginia is guaranteed $353 million, while Wisconsin will receive between $219 million and $313 million. Meta is now forced to put a leash on usage, implementing a 2-hour daily limit for users under 18 and mandatory productive pauses after 15 minutes of continuous use. A nighttime block from midnight to 6 a.m. and a ban on push notifications during school hours from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. will also be enforced. The company must also scrap beauty filters and implement robust age assurance within 1 year. The financial world is waiting with bated breath for Federal Reserve Chairman Kevin Warsh to take the stage this Friday, August 28, 2026. Warsh will deliver the keynote address at the Jackson Hole Economic Policy Symposium in Wyoming at 10 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. This year's event, titled Financial Innovation, Implications for Payments and Policy, has inflation at the top of the agenda. Market analysts, including Joseph Brusuelas, are eager to see if Warsh will finally break his hands-off communication style and provide a clear reaction function for restoring price stability. The speech is expected to address the global economy's struggle with shocks from the Iran war, the rise of artificial intelligence, shifting demographics, and productivity changes. Investors are hoping for a clear signal on when and how the Fed will adjust interest rates to keep the economy from overheating. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Opus 4.8, Gemini Pro 3.1, Gemini Flash 3, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.